no regrets, no confusion. There'll be no pollution. I'm so thankful I've decided to change my ways.
Welcome back to the Leaving Eden podcast. It is a lovely Friday morning. If you're listening to this on Patreon, we recorded this morning just because that's how our schedule ended up shaking out. So hello, and it's nice to talk to you actually on the day that you're hearing this. If you're listening to this on Monday, we recorded this last Friday. My name is Gavriel Hakohen, and I am here with my BFF and co-host, cult expert, cult survivor, Sadie to the Carpenter.
Hello.
Hello.
What are we talking about today?
Today, we're talking about who is the Antichrist.
Oh boy.
We're bringing up some theories here. I read 2 books for this episode.
I had a panic attack for this episode.
I mean, we have equitable distribution of labor here on this podcast. So
Yes.
What is more labor? Having a panic attack. Ugh, can't talk. It's early in the morning. Having a panic attack or reading 2 books.
Please vote on our Patreon.
Please vote on our Patreon. I should note that the 2 books that I read, one of them was called Gorbachev, Has the Real Antichrist Come? It was written by Robert W. Fade. It was published in 1988. And the other book that I read was a Google Books that I paid 99 cents for. It's written by Stephen Kirk. It was Satan as Barack Obama.
Oh.
So that is 2 of the potential Antichrist candidates. Spoiler alert. Sadie, who's the Antichrist candidate that you researched?
By research, do you mean had a panic attack about? That would be Donald Trump. I think I talked about this on a Patreon closer to the time that the assassination attempt actually happened. There have been some developments since then that I'm really excited to share with the class. And I'm going to go into detail on how I talked myself out of the panic attack.
I would just like to say, I think that if we were in school together, we would have been like the dream team for group projects.
Oh, hell yeah.
We would have killed it every single time. People would have been like waiting. When's the Gavi and Sadie group project coming through? Because every time we'd be like, oh, we're working together, right? Same as always. Like we'd just kill it. Were you good with the poster boards? Oh,
hell yeah.
I bet.
I can send you a picture. I did a poster board for my little brother when he was in high school that I'm still proud of, and it's been like 10 years. So I'll see if I can dig up a picture for you.
And I was good with the PowerPoint. So you could do the poster board. I could do the PowerPoint. We could, split the research. Anyway, that's what we're talking about today. Who is the Antichrist? 3 candidates today: Obama, Donald Trump, Mikhail Gorbachev. So anyway, before we get into that, the Leaving Eden podcast is the podcast about my BFF and co-host, cult expert, cult survivor, Sadie Carpenter, her life in and escape from the independent fundamental Baptist cult, the cult in which she was raised. We talk about this cult. We talk about other cults. We talk about religion. We talk about fundamentalism. We talk about the real and present threat the cults and cult ideologies pose to society as a whole. And it is our goal to promote freedom of mind, freedom of thought, and freedom of religion. So if you like our show, and if you were a fan of our show, then there's some things that you can do to support us. Number 1, you can subscribe to our Patreon, patreon.com/Leaving Eden podcast, where you'll get an extended, uncensored, ad-free version of most of our episodes, including today's episode where we had a fun discussion before the actual podcast episode started rolling. And we'll probably talk about more stuff on the Patreon because this is kind of a crazy episode. So you'll want to hear all that bonus content on the Patreon at patreon.com/Leaving Eden podcast. You can join our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Eden Exodus. Fantastic place for group discussions. If you want to talk to other fundamentalism survivors, or if you don't have that experience, but you just want to learn more, you want to post like fun religion memes. It can be lighthearted. It can be heavy. It can be, emotional, and it can be kind of like a posting group as well. It's kind of like I think we have a good mix of all of those things.
Just like us.
Yeah, that's how people want to be. There's also the subreddit. Subreddit doesn't get as much traction as the Facebook group. Facebook group's really the main place where we talk about stuff. You can also share our podcast with your friends, your family, your coworkers, anyone who you think might get enjoyment out of it or might learn something from it. We had so many people tell us since the episode with Tia came out a couple of days ago. We've gotten so many people tell us, thank you for, having this episode with Tia. We, just pre-ordered her book, or I just pre-ordered her book, or they bought the book at the store or whatever when they heard the episode. And that was fantastic because we got a lot of enjoyment out of making that episode as well.
Yeah, I was so thankful to be able to snag Tia for an interview, and absolutely still want everybody, if you haven't read her book yet, it's called A Well-Trained Wife. Go get it. Go read it. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's been out for a couple of days, and I think pretty much every single deconstruction pod has had Tia on. So go listen to wherever she is on all of those pods as well. I swear, she's been making the rounds. It's been fantastic to see somebody like her getting all of the attention, getting all of the press that she deserves for her amazing story, truly an inspiring story. And I think that's all we got to say. Are we thanking the patrons now?
Can I thank the patrons?
Go for it.
All right. Our I Gave It All to Your patrons are Kathleen Moncrief, Melissa Manown, Melora King, and Todd Dale on behalf of his spouse, Madeline Antrim. Thank you so much to the I Gave It All tier patrons. The Faith Promise Missions tier patrons are Alex P., Alicia Guild, Ali Allen, Chrissa Walker, Dora J., Eleanor Donahue, Hannah Ross, Hope Norum, Horton Here's a Shane, Janine Callan, Jana Connor, Jen Kaharski, Jessica Tambo, Jonna, Junie B. Jones, and the B stands for Backstreet's Back. Gabby, you're supposed to say, all right. Kat Hinwood, Kay Terwee, Kristen Marie, Learned Vixen, Linda Morgan, Madeline Antrim, Madeline Cusick, Maddie the Seventh Day Badventist, Mary Martin, Maybe I'm 1010, Megan Arndt, Rob the Methodist, Stephanie Johnson, Steve and Amy, Susie, Tara McNamara, Wes the Cowboy, and Zoe Shuck. Thank you so much to everyone who supports us at the Faith Promise Missions tier, the I Gave It All tier, and at any tier over on Patreon. And of course, as always, thank you to the people who support us in non-financial ways as well. Those of you who share about us on social media, recommend us to people you think might be interested, leave us a positive review on wherever you listen to your podcasts. All of those things have a very real impact, and we are so thankful. In general, we talk about a lot of potentially triggering topics on our show, including but not limited to suicide and mental health, racism, misogyny, PTSD and PTSD symptoms, child abuse, mental, physical, and sexual abuse, and spiritual abuse, including guilt, shame, and fear. In most episodes, we will mention at least a few of these topics, but we try to avoid any graphic detail unless it's relevant to the story that we're telling, and we do our best to give the audience a heads up before we get into that kind of detail if we do feel it's necessary for an episode.
So earlier this spring, we explored many different beliefs about the rapture, the end times, the book of Revelation, as well as the second coming of Jesus. We especially looked into premillennialism, which is, the prevalent theory within fundamentalism, American evangelicalism, a lot of Baptists, a lot of different groups of Christians in the United States. So maybe just like a little refresher, premillennial futurism is the belief that the rapture, the tribulation, the end of days, the Armageddon, the second coming of Jesus to earth, which is prophesied about in the book of Revelation, right? Revelation.
Correct.
And other places, possibly.
The rapture is sort of prophesied about in the book of Revelation, and also sort of potentially in other books of the Bible, but that's debatable.
Yes, but if you believe in premillennial futurism.
If you believe in premillennial futurism, the rapture is prophesied in Revelation, Daniel, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, and probably everywhere else.
Isaiah too, right?
Probably.
You don't just believe that that's coming, you believe it's coming soon, like within the next couple of years. So make sure you get as many people saved as you can, because their eternal souls are depending on it. So naturally, if you believe this, then your confirmation bias is going to kick in, and it's going to show you signs that this is coming. And there are going to be clues that maybe won't tell you the exact day, the exact time, but little warnings to make sure that you get a move on, you stay motivated. It's like if you know, you know. These warnings will include wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes, fires, poisoning of the rivers, stars falling to the earth, famine, flood, pestilence, general conditions of calamity, of course. As Billy Joel reminded us in his 1989 Billboard #1 hit, We Didn't Start the Fire, conditions of wars, rumors of wars, death, destruction, calamity. These are all constant conditions on Earth that are always and have always been going since the beginning of humanity. So if you're looking for these things, you're going to find these things.
Yeah. I could argue that is on purpose. That Jesus said, from a progressive Christian standpoint, a person might say, well, Jesus gave these signs of the end times that are things that are literally always happening. And that's the point. It's a message of, let's not try to predict the exact time, and let's just be on good behavior.
But then you can say, well, it's coming soon. It's
Mm-hmm.
We need to, really get a move on with saving everybody.
Right. And one of my favorite things about this whole rapture is coming right now phenomenon is the book 77 Reasons the Rapture Will Happen in 1977. There was a little pamphlet printed by that name, and it had 77 reasons that the author thought that the rapture was imminent. When the rapture did not happen in 1977, the author printed a book called 78 Reasons the Rapture Will Happen in 1978. And it was the same 77 reasons from 1977. And then the 78th reason was it didn't happen in 1977.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Which one was more popular? Do you think that the 77 or the 78? Is that like the...
I don't know.
I mean, that's like the King James 1611 versus the King James revised that they came out in 1650.
What, the 1759?
Yeah, the 1759. But it's still 1611.
You're not reading the 1611.
Neither are they. The fundies don't. One sign that the rapture is surely coming, however, is the rise of the Antichrist. Who is the Antichrist? Well, we can look to the Bible to find out. And in the Bible, here are the clues. So John 22:2 in the King James said...
Nope, 1 John.
1 John 22:2. Oh, I thought I was making a list. And then I forgot to put like number one,
that's
number
the
two.
sequels.
Okay. They have first and second, then they have...
and third, and regular John.
Regular John. That's a great name for... like an alternative rock band. Like if you're like a college rock band, you do a little like shoegaze. Regular John.
I can get it.
Yeah, you dress like REM on stage. 1 John 2:22, excuse me, in the King James Version says, "Who is a liar but he that denieth that Jesus is the Christ? He is Antichrist that denieth the Father and the Son." So according to BillyGraham.com, so it's real evangelical comes from BillyGraham.com or BillyGraham.org, excuse me. The Antichrist is a person who will appear in the days before the second coming of Jesus. This person is not Satan, important to make that distinction, but they will use every trick in Satan's book in order to gain power and oppose God and Jesus. He will be a man of lawlessness, and he will gain many followers and exercise great power over these people. So number one, the Antichrist will be in opposition to Christ. I guess that's simple enough. It's in the name. Number two, Antichrist will use powers of deception. He will use false teachings. He will mislead people, even lie to them, portraying himself as a savior. Number three, the Antichrist will be a charismatic leader who is persuasive and well-liked by a lot of people, very charming, and able to use their abilities of deception to make themselves even more influential. Number 4, they will rise to power, which will give them the ability to persecute Christians and attack Christian teachings. Number 5, they may or may not have supernatural abilities depending on who you ask. The Antichrist is supposed to be fully human, but is the servant of Satan. So kind of like how Jesus is fully human, fully God, this person is fully 100% human, but they have powers from Satan. So it's a question, but they're not Satan in the way that Jesus is God. So it's a question of like, does Satan grant powers to the Antichrist to give them supernatural abilities? We don't know. But if you're the kind of Christian who believes this, you're probably also the kind of Christian that believes in demonic attacks, demons attacking people, demons working through people with weird, crazy supernatural powers. So you may believe in the supernatural powers. They will possibly use these powers to convince other people that they are a divine figure.
Yeah, I think there's a verse. Let me see if I can pull it up quickly enough. Yeah, Revelation 13:14, or 13:13 and 14. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by a sword and did live. So there is some amount of miraculous power given to the Antichrist and the beast. It is the power to make signs appear, like make basically astronomical fireworks.
That's kind of cool.
It doesn't specify whether there are any other powers that go along with being the Antichrist, such as healing powers or levitation, or like, we don't know what other powers there might be, but we know specifically the power to make signs, make things appear is included.
Yeah, so whether or not you believe that's supernatural depends on, okay, this person could be like a leader of a nation that has power over the skies, or it could be...
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because it can also be interpreted as that it's not a supernatural power. It's something this person has the ability to do because of who they are.
The Apocrypha, fun to bring up the Apocrypha on this podcast. I know that's your favorite thing. Has the following description, and it says, the appearance of his face is dark, the hairs of his head are as sharp as arrows, his eyebrows are like a field, his right eye like the morning star rising, and his other eye like a lion. His mouth is a cubit's breadth, his teeth a broad span, his fingers are like sickles, his footprint 2 spans, and upon his head an inscription, Antichrist. That's Apocrypha. Is that canon? Not really. No. It is King James, though.
For those who were not raised fundamentalist, a cubit is about 18 inches. A span is about 9 inches, give or take. Yeah, not King James. But I wonder, that sounds so familiar, and I wonder like where I've heard it quoted before.
The Apocrypha, like, it's not canon, but people quote from it. It's like tertiary or secondary or something. So it's like you can kind of pull from there as inspiration, but not like use it as like...
Yeah, I kind of want to do an Apocrypha episode now because I posted that super old Bible that I bought at a yard sale on my Instagram, and it has the Apocrypha in it.
That was a really cool find, by the way.
Did I ever tell you how much I paid for it?
No, how much?
$3.
$3 for a 150-year-old Bible?
Yeah, and I Googled it, and it's worth considerably more than that, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to just keep it for my collection.
That's kind of sick. I love old, like, historical artifacts like that. That's so awesome.
I love, love, love rare books, and so I'm very slowly building up a collection.
I'm really happy that you found that. I'm stoked for you.
Thank you. Okay, so Gorbachev. Is he the Antichrist?
So we'll get to that in the third... Well, he's dead, so he died like 2 years ago. So no.
Or did he appear to have a mortal wound, and is he going to come back to life now? It doesn't specify how long the guy is down and out with the mortal wound.
So in the book that I read later in this episode, the reason why is the author gives 16 ways to know the Antichrist, and I'm going to read the 16 ways from the top. So we can
Okay.
keep looking at these when we keep going through it. So number 1, he will appear abruptly like a monster rising out of the sea. Number 2, he will have 7 heads. Number 3, he will have 10 horns and 10 crowns. Number 4, he will rule 10 countries in addition to his own. Number 5, upon each head, the name of blasphemy will be written. Number 6, he will be like a leopard. Number 7, his feet will be those of a bear. Number 8, his mouth will be that of a lion. Number 9, the dragon will give him power, his seat, and great authority. Number 10, he will be the 8th king of a country. Number 11, 10 other kings will give him strength and power. Number 12, they will have no power of their own, but serve at his discretion. Number 13, these kings will be of one mind or ideology with the Antichrist. Number 14, the number of his name will be connected with 666. Number 15, one of the heads will have a deadly wound. Number 16, this wound will be healed dramatically and the world will be astonished. Now, throughout history, there are so many figures that could possibly fit this description. And throughout the 20th and 21st centuries, well, maybe not all of these descriptions, because some of them are seem kind of like, but a lot of them, especially the earlier ones about the charismatic leader who is going to rise, throughout the 20th and 21st centuries anyway, which is roughly the time frame that premillennialism is like the mainstream end times belief of evangelicals. There have been many figures who Christians have believed to be the Antichrist. These figures include, but are not limited to, Adolf Hitler, John F. Kennedy, Pope John Paul II, and Hillary Clinton. Now, obviously, Jesus has not come back in the air, raptured everybody up and all that. So they've not been right about that. I had a listener in the Facebook group kind of explain the workaround for this. And the theory is that there is, Satan always has a Antichrist candidate prepared, and that all of these figures could have been the Antichrist, but they didn't happen to be correctly positioned to seize power when the rapture occurred.
Right.
So this is a convenient workaround because you never actually have to be the right person. You never have to be right about who the Antichrist is. You can just cast aspersions about anybody you don't like. And then when their term of power comes to an end, you can feel like you staved off Satan for one more day.
Ooh, that's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah, so the reasoning behind that is there's a verse about only God knows the day and the hour that the rapture will come, and not even Jesus knows. So that's why in a lot of rapture songs, like the one that got stuck in my head this week, you'll hear reference to God saying, "Jesus, it's time." The one that was stuck in my head is called "The Midnight Cry." "Son, go get your children." Is the line from that song. It's still stuck in my head, and it's been like 4 days. Send help. But they, rapture songs or rapture media will reference God telling Jesus, "It's time, go get your people," because the verse in scripture that says that only God knows, not even Jesus knows the day or the time. If Jesus doesn't even know the day or the time, then neither does Satan. It's a surprise to everybody. So it makes sense, given that Satan would always have somebody prepared to step up and be the Antichrist if the rapture were to happen.
So that leads me on to the first section. We're talking about one person who it has been theorized by many evangelical Christians, fundamentalist Christians, could be the Antichrist. And that is the 44th president of the United States, Barack Obama.
Oh, man.
You remember this one. You were around for this one.
I sure was.
So Barack Obama, I remember his rise to political prominence in 2008 during the 2008 presidential campaign was pretty crazy. If you remember that, if you were there for that, I was, I think in 2008, I was more of a fan of Hillary Clinton than I was of Obama, but I was still kind of stoked that it was going to be Obama. And I remember I waited I went to a Obama campaign rally in May of 2008, and I waited in line for like 3 hours to see him on the Portland waterfront, and there was like 80 or 100,000 people there. It was crazy. Yeah, it was huge. It was unbelievable. So, you know, he had this kind of like meteoric rise to power, or not rise to, but, you know, rise to prominence, because he was, even if you weren't the biggest fan of him, or if you liked somebody else better, he was still a guy that you wanted to see, because he was one of the best orators of, you know, of the generation, probably like the best orator of the generation. So even if you weren't like a huge fan of his, that you would still want to see him speak, because he was an amazing speaker. On August 1st, 2008, during the run-up to the 2008 presidential election, Republican presidential nominee John McCain, his campaign, released a satirical video called The One. I'll play the audio from this video. It's actually kind of funny, and pretty tame compared to today's political rhetoric.
It shall be known that in 2008 the world will be blessed. They will call him The One.
A nation healed. A world repaired. We are the ones we've been waiting for.
And he has anointed himself, ready to carry the burden of the one. To quote Barack, I have become a symbol of America, returning to our best traditions. He can do no wrong.
Do you have any doubts?
Never. Can you see the light?
A light will shine down from somewhere. It will light upon you. You will experience an epiphany, and you will say to yourself, I have to vote for Barack.
And the world shall receive his blessings.
This was the moment when the rise of the oceans began to slow and our planet began to heal. Behold his mighty hand.
Barack Obama may be the one, but is he ready to lead?
So this video kind of pokes a bit of fun at Obama's image as an inspirational leader, and it includes a clip of Charlton Heston in The Ten Commandments parting the Red Sea, and the question it poses at the end is like a extremely normal thing to say about an opponent in a presidential election. Jesus, I miss the 2008 political discourse. What on earth happened? I don't know.
So I was watching that clip that you sent me of this commercial, and I was thinking, oh, the end of it is going to be, but is he the Antichrist? Because that is what would go on TV now. And the question at the end is actually extremely normal and a valid thing to ask.
It's like, he's only been a senator for like 4 years. Is he the guy that we should have as president, or is he just not experienced enough to do that? I'm like, that's a valid question to ask about somebody who's trying to be the president. That's a big responsibility.
I was watching this video and I was 100% expecting it to say, but is he the Antichrist?
Nope, not the Antichrist. This was pre that.
Just, is he too young to be president?
Is he too young? Is he too inexperienced? Should we give him more time to, mature?
Wow.
And like, I miss 2008 political discourse, man. What happened? Bring it back.
I was going to say take me back to 2008, but in 2008 I was in a cult, so I don't know.
Around this time, many evangelical and fundamentalist Christians believed that Obama was, in fact, the Antichrist. As evidence that Obama has come out as the enemy of Christians, they used a quote in which Obama described white working class voters in the Rust Belt who were kind of abandoned by both parties. And the quote from him, and I'm reading this, he said, "They get bitter, they cling to guns or religion or apathy to people who aren't like them, or anti-immigrant sentiment or anti-trade sentiment as a way to explain their frustrations." Which I think is kind of an accurate read on a certain kind of person. Mm. But the cling to guns and religion part of that quote kind of got spun, and people being like, oh, he's anti-Christian. Mm. Authors of the Left Behind series, Tim LaHaye and Jerry Jenkins, said in 2008 that they did not believe that Obama fit the criteria for the Antichrist because he is not European. Despite this, the theory that Obama is the Antichrist persisted. So I wanted to learn more about this. So I purchased an ebook titled Satan as Barack Obama, which was written by Stephen Kirk in 2011. It is a breezy 85 pages, and it cost me a cool 99 cents on Google Books. It is also available on Kindle if you want it for a beach read this summer or a cozy fireside read this fall. According to Kirk, Obama does not or may not ever know that he is the Antichrist, but he in fact is the Antichrist.
Oh.
So I guess he's the accidental Antichrist.
That would have been a better title for the book, don't you think?
Yeah, accidental Antichrist.
Yeah.
That also sounds like a great name of like either like a pop punk album, Accidental Antichrist.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, Brad Paisley and LL Cool J did the Accidental Racist song. Do you remember that one?
No.
Go listen to it. It's really cringeworthy.
Oh boy.
People who remember that one, they know that one. Anyway, Mr. Kirk starts his theory with Luke 10:18. According to Kirk, Jesus phonetically said Barack Obama when he described Satan falling.
Oh, I remember this one.
Oh, so you heard this theory?
Yes.
This is crazy. I'd never read this before. This was a theory from him. So Barak is the Hebrew word for lightning, and Bama is the Hebrew word for a high place, which is like that's accurate. That's what those words are. According to Kirk, in Luke 10:18, when Jesus says, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven," the words that came out of Jesus's mouth were, "I saw Satan fall like Barack Obama." Like he literally said Barack Obama when he was saying lightning from heaven.
Right.
Now you have noticed, and I looked this up on Bible Hub, which has like every translation, that every translation that I saw said heaven, and the word Bama does not mean heaven. The word Bama means high place. The actual Hebrew word for heaven is Shemayim, which sounds nothing like Obama. But Kirk goes into quite a long-winded explanation about how Jesus would not have used the word Bama and not Shemayim. However, in order for this to be true, you have to like throw out the entire idea that the King James version is inspired and preserved, and I don't think that's going to fly with most of the IFB.
Yeah, actually, they just skipped it.
Really?
They just said, oh, yeah, Jesus said lightning fall like Barack Obama, and then just didn't do the whole explanation.
They didn't?
Yep.
This is giving email forward or Facebook share from your aunt?
Yes, like everything in the IFB.
It's all, or a chain letter before the email forward, before the Facebook share from your aunt. It was the chain letter.
I am too young to have ever actually seen a chain letter, but I have read about them, and it is very interesting.
I remember chain emails. Do you remember chain emails?
Oh, yeah. I was very much in the generation of you get an email or a Facebook message, and it send this to 10 people and post it on your wall, or your crush is going to die. But if you do post it on your wall, then your crush will message you within 24 hours, and someone will send you $500.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
That's very much the era of the internet that I entered into.
You know what it is now that it's not, it's the thirst texts.
Yeah. Those bug me. But
It's send this to 10 of your bad bitches, or you will be stuck with a pillow princess for the rest of your life.
with all the emojis.
With all the emojis.
Okay. Usually those really annoy me, but my favorite one that I've ever seen is the one that you sent me when Biden stepped down from the nomination.
Oh, the Joe Biden thirst. That was incredible. Maybe I'll post that on the Instagram, or like I wish we had like a Leaving Eden After Dark posting Instagram where we could. We could get one. Have that like the Leaving Eden Finsta.
I mean, we could do that. We could also do an Instagram that's only for our Patreon subscribers.
Leaving Eden only for our fans. Leaving Eden only. No, we're not doing that. No one wants that. He also, anyway, back to this theory.
Scotty.
Back to.
I can't even make a joke out of that.
Back to Kirk's theory. Kirk also points out that Barack Obama's first chief of staff was Rahm Emanuel, who is Jewish and whose first name means thunder. The only problem with that is that the name Ram doesn't mean thunder. It means mercy. The Hebrew word for thunder is Ra'am, not Ram. Like there's a apostrophe in there.
Oh boy.
Yeah, this is kind of bunk. He's like looking for connections that aren't there, and he's trying to make stuff fit. Anyway, chapter 2 of this book is titled "What Are the Odds?" And at this point, we get to the conspiracy theorists' favorite 6 words, which are: there is no such thing as coincidence. What are the odds that a highly charismatic man whose name is phonetically the same as what Jesus allegedly said about the fall of Satan one time would become the most powerful man in the world?
Oh.
I mean, he's got a point. He goes on to say that Barack Obama somehow means 666, and 666 also means salvation by socialism, but he doesn't really explain his logic here. I tried reading it 5 or 6 times, and I don't really understand the thought process at all, but, you know.
You tried.
I tried. In chapter 3, he describes socialism as, quote, the great betrayer of Christ. He then armchair diagnoses Obama as a narcissist who seeks political power to make up for the abandonment by his father as a child.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy. But like, if you read Obama's autobiography, Dreams from My Father, which is a good book, I'd recommend reading that if you haven't read it. It's very interesting. Even if you're not a huge fan of Obama, it's definitely a book that's worth reading. It was very, inspirational. If you read that book, you'll understand that this is not really the reality, because while Obama didn't really have a good relationship with or any relationship with his father for most of his life, he did have a father figure in his life whose his name was Lolo Sotoro, who was his stepfather when he lived in Indonesia. Kirk also says that Judas Iscariot is the archetypical betrayer of Christ, and therefore the Antichrist will have the qualities that are similar to those of Judas. And socialism is like Judas because it is jealous of Christ, because socialism is when the government tries to do the things that the church does, but it fails. So therefore socialism is the betrayer of Christ, because socialism is jealous of Christ and betrays it.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And Obama is a socialist because he has a healthcare plan, which is famously not socialist, in fact, despite attempts to make it socialist light, but that didn't end up happening. Because he came out with Obamacare, he is the betrayer of Christ and therefore the Antichrist. And he also says that Obama is postmodernist because his successful embrace of new media as opposed to legacy media outlets makes him postmodernist, which is socialist, which is evil. And he also quotes some person who says that postmodernism is amoral, and then says Obama is amoral and therefore he's the Antichrist because, like postmodernism, he is amoral.
Right. Obviously.
It's extremely tenuous. Next, he goes on to say that the doomed land spoken about in Isaiah 18 is actually America. And to argue for this, he goes back to, he does kind of his own translation of Isaiah 18 to make it about America. And then he says that the winged spear in his translation of Isaiah is obviously the F-15 Eagle jet fighter, and that being the name Eagle jet fighter is significant because America is symbolized by an eagle.
I will say that the winged spear in Isaiah and all of the gears and spheres and winged machines in Ezekiel are often interpreted to be modern military equipment.
Is that almost like accepted canon?
Yeah, because God allowed Isaiah and Ezekiel to see things that wouldn't exist for thousands more years because they were truly prophets. So God allowed them to see into the future. And if you were a person from that long ago describing the technology that we have now, that's probably the words that you would use to describe it.
So you would describe an F-15 Eagle jet fighter as a winged spear?
I mean, it makes sense to me.
I don't think that's what I would describe it. I would describe it as a metal bird.
Yeah.
But that's just me. He then says that God telling people to behold something is like in the Star-Spangled Banner when they say, "Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light?" This one I don't
Sure.
know. Sure.
But that doesn't mean that Francis Scott Key is a prophet.
Depends on who you ask. He says that the rapture would have happened already if the Allies had lost World War II. He says that America has become corrupted and will be abandoned by its allies, and that America is the mother of harlots and the whore of Babylon.
Okay. We talked about that.
We talked about that. His conclusion and call to action is to, quote, be no different than the Christians in the days of Paul, and our only hope is to trust in Jesus. Which, to be honest, doesn't sound like a call to engage in scary behavior or psycho behavior, even if you do believe in conspiracy theories. In spite of this, in November of 2011, a man from Idaho Falls, Idaho, which I would not recommend Idaho Falls. It's not a very happening place. I've been there. He was arrested for firing a semi-automatic rifle at the White House, with multiple bullets striking the White House. And while neither the president or the first lady were home at the time, and nobody was injured, this is still a very serious crime. The shooter was a man named Oscar Ramiro Ortega Hernandez, and he had previously reportedly been making statements to friends and family that he believed that Barack Obama was the Antichrist, that he had been planting computer chips in children, and that the world was going to end in 2012. And Obama's rise to power was the rise to power of the Antichrist, foretold in the book of Revelation.
Right.
Makes sense. In 2013, this one is wild. This one really got me. A public policy poll showed that 13% of Americans believed that then President Barack Obama was the actual Antichrist. And another 13% said that they could not be sure whether Obama was the Antichrist or not. That's crazy to me.
Oh my God.
In fairness, 73% of Americans said that they did not believe that President Obama was the Antichrist.
I'm trying to think whether I would have said not sure or no, he's not the Antichrist in 2013. And honestly, that might depend on what part of 2013.
2013 was a heavy deconstruction year.
Yep, 2013 was the storage closet incident that wasn't an incident at all. The the side hug from hell. Moving from Hiles-Anderson to Pensacola. I think I would have probably said that I did not believe that Obama was the Antichrist because my dad did not think that he was the Antichrist.
What about 2011? You think you would have said
I would
yes?
have said I couldn't be sure. For sure.
So you're never fully gone. You were never like fully...
No, my church never really got on the Obama is the Antichrist train. I think my dad may have preached a sermon about is Obama the Antichrist, but came to the conclusion, almost certainly not.
I wish that he was still around so we could ask him about that.
I want his
That
sermon
would've been-
notes. I mean, he kept notes for every single sermon he ever preached. Hypothetically, it's in a filing cabinet at my mom's house.
That would be crazy. That would be incredible to take a look at. I want to know what the actual, I mean, he was like an Orthodox fundamentalist, not Orthodox as in like Orthodox Christian, but he was like, what the fundamentals believe at their base core, that was him. So his would have been very scripturally based. It wouldn't have been.
Right. And my dad was a really big Hiles fan to the point that he wore the same shoes that Jack Hiles did and wore the same brand of shirts that Jack Hiles did. Like, he was that level of Hiles fan, but he also had a lot more common sense and education than Hiles and actually used the Bible for what he had to say. He had his wins, he had his losses, he had his unfortunate moments. But my dad was, I would say, significantly better of a speaker than Jack Hiles and significantly better of a researcher.
I bet that if Hiles were around during that time, then he would have been saying Obama was the Antichrist. The 2013 public policy poll, however, so that's a 13% of Americans in 2013 believed that Obama was in fact the Antichrist, and another 13 said that they couldn't be sure. So that's 26% of Americans were like, either it's true or it's possible. That's the same percentage of Americans that prefer Pepsi over Coca-Cola.
Yikes.
However, I personally think that, and this is kind of my read on the situation, that the whole Obama is the Antichrist movement is really heavily tied to birtherism. It's really heavily tied to the conspiracy theory that Obama's birth certificate was faked in order for him to be able to become president, because the idea that it would be faked in order for him to become president requires a decades in the making conspiracy in order to groom one man for the role of becoming president of the United States, and faking his birth certificate in order to give him a viable backstory so that the satanic foreign agent could infiltrate the government to the highest level and become leader of the free world is exactly the type of thing that like the New World Order would do and the Illuminati would do. In fact, this is actually the backstory of Nikolai Carpathia, who's the villain in the Left Behind franchise. So, like, if you remember 10, 15 years ago when Donald Trump first became a popular, like, right-wing political commentator on Twitter, it was because he was pushing the Obama birtherism. And I think that he got on the birtherism train because he's a racist head, and completely by accident got himself a following of conspiracy cultists who believed that Obama wasn't born in America because he's the Antichrist. And my theory is that this is one of the foundational reasons why, no matter how unchristian this man acts and however many times he cheats on his wife and lies and abuses people and does blasphemy and embodies sinfulness and idolatry, however many of like his former associates disown or deny him, these weirdos will never abandon him, because he helped proliferate this conspiracy theory that has become core to their belief system. And these types of New World Order Illuminati conspiracy theorists who are drawn to him because of his support for this theory, then these are the people who went on to become the QAnon believers. So while we can make fun of these conspiracy nutjobs for being like a weird idiot clown show, I hope that we can also illustrate that these things are actually of consequence and that it's important to not allow them to foment in our places of worship.
I 100% agree. Thank you for that. So speaking of weird QAnon conspiracies, would you like to take an offering break and come back and talk about Trump?
Oh, God. Yeah, let's do that.
Hey, Sadie here. If this is your first time listening to the Leaving Eden podcast, make sure you go back and check out episode 57. It's a primer episode for new listeners. That episode tells my personal story and gives you all the terms and information that you'll need to know going forward. Also, check out our cult true crime series, The First Family of Fundamentalism, so that you can get the whole cult story. If you like our show, you can support us by joining our Patreon, where we have extended and uncensored episodes as well as other bonus content available. You can also join in the discussion in our Facebook group. That group is called Eden Exodus. Tell a friend, tell a family member, tell your worst enemy. The Leaving Eden podcast is a fully independent podcast, and we really appreciate your support. Now, back to the show.
We are back from our break. We talked about why they think Obama is the Antichrist and why I think that this is a load of a crock of poo-poo. Sadie, do you want to tell us why people think Donald Trump is the Antichrist?
Yeah, it seems like most people don't. I think my brain sometimes does, and I have to talk myself down. There have been some developments since the attempted assassination. So at 6:11 p.m. Local time on July 13th, 2024, there was an apparent assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. And Gabi, have you seen the Facebook numerologists going with this yet?
I've seen a couple of screenshots, but outside of that, I haven't really paid attention to it.
This was really interesting to me because people pulled up the verse Ephesians 6:11 because the attempt was at 6:11 p.m. And Ephesians 6:11 says, "Put on the whole armor of God that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil." And the Facebook numerologists just took off running with this. They said, oh, it is because Trump is standing up against the devil, and this is evidence that he was protected by God in this assassination attempt, on and on and on. I think many people who have friends or family still in fundamentalist circles had probably heard this 6:11 idea. They're making t-shirts now with 6:11 on it. I did find out looking into this that it does go deeper than just the scripture reference.
How so?
So that verse, Ephesians 6:11, specifically the phrases whole armor of God or the wiles of the devil, is quoted and referenced in more than a few posts by the notorious internet poster known as Q. So this is something, if you're not familiar with QAnon, there's a documentary. I liked the HBO documentary, which is Q Into the Storm.
Incredible watch.
Really, really helpful in understanding what's most likely going on behind Q. Q is a internet poster on originally 4chan and then 8chan, right?
Yeah.
Who claims to be a person with high security clearance within the Trump administration who knows lots and lots of things and will pass these coded messages to their followers through their posts on these internet forums. Q often references Christian ideas, Christian mythology, Bible verses, that sort of thing. And Ephesians 6:11 is referenced a lot by Q in their posts. Where it really got interesting was an online account called Symbolism 666, purported to have added up all of the dates on which Q referenced this verse in some way or another, and got 2,751. They then added 2,751 to the end of 2016 and came up with 7/13/24, the day that Trump was shot. That is some incredible conspiracy theory math.
Okay, you know what they probably did? They probably added up the numbers and then subtracted that from the day, and then they're just like, how does this...
I don't know how someone has enough time on their hands to put that together. How many things did they have to try that didn't add up to anything first? Okay, so I saw the Ephesians 6:11 thing going around all over Facebook. I did not see the whole extra bit about the Q numerology behind it. So I thought that was really worth looking at. It did make me think of checking some other versions or other verses in the New Testament to see what messages they might have for us about the Trump assassination attempt. So John 6:11, and Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed to the disciples, and the disciples to them that were set down, and likewise of the fishes as much as they would.
Okay, so what's the secret message from this, that if you're a Q drop, waiting on that Q drop, what are you going to read into this?
Let's see. Oh, Jesus distributed the loaves to the disciples, which means that Trump is going to bring back better economic times.
That seems fairly benign.
Yeah. So it turns out a lot of the more books of the New Testament than I thought don't have 6 chapters. Galatians 6:11, you see how large a letter I have written unto you with mine own hand.
Oh, because so that could be that, Q is sending us large messages and they're actually coming from God.
Yeah, this doesn't tell us what specifically the sign from God is, but it says there's a large letter. There's something that we should be paying attention to coming from God right now. So that one's a pretty good prophecy. I don't know why they used that one instead of Ephesians 6:11, because I honestly think that one's a little bit better.
Yeah, but it's not as spicy. It's not as standing up to evil.
I also looked up 2 Corinthians 6:11 through 13. O ye Corinthians, our mouth is open unto you, our heart is enlarged. Ye are not straitened in us, but ye are straitened in your own bowels. Now for a recompense in the same, I speak as unto my children, be ye also enlarged.
So what's this mean?
Trump's chronic constipation saved his life? I don't know.
Well done steak and ketchup will be a lifesaver for all of you.
Yeah, because he's straightened in his own bowels.
Those bowels must be bricked. They must be like rock solid.
I pulled up those verses to demonstrate that just because one verse that it happens to be chapter 6, verse 11, says something very marginally tangential to the thing that happened, does not mean that it is prophecy. Because verses say a lot of things. So back to the Trump assassination attempt, because this did actually freak me out. The verse that came to mind was Revelation 13:3. And I saw one of his heads as if it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast.
this was the thing that in the immediate aftermath of the assassination attempt you sent to us.
Yeah. The assassination attempt happened, and I was like, oh my gosh, I got to see a real assassination attempt. Obviously, this isn't something that I would ever cheer for happening, as much as I dislike Trump and think he's an awful guy and would be an awful president again. Assassination attempts are not good for the country in which I live.
No.
They're not good for anybody. I don't advocate violence. So obviously it's not something that good that happened, but I was pretty cheesed to like live through one because presidential assassination attempts are such a major special interest of mine. Like if it was going to happen, I would prefer it not to happen. But if it were going to happen, I would like to live through it and see it. So that was pretty cool for me. I talked about this on a Patreon section, I think closer to the time that it actually happened. But I saw there was an attempt, and then I noticed that it was a head wound. And I spiraled so badly.
Right, because if this guy's the Antichrist, then that means that he's going to come back to power.
Right, because that means so if he's the Antichrist, he's going to come back to power. This head wound is going to be miraculously healed. And knowing I'm not a ballistics expert by any means, but I try to be informed, and I do have an interest in presidential assassinations. So I've read and noticed a little bit about ballistics, knowing that to clip somebody's ear like that and not cause more damage is pretty unusual. So I was terrified. I read Revelation chapter 13. I freaked the hell out. I had like an hour-long panic attack. And what fixed it was I went back and read a good bit of Revelation. Like I read chapters 4 through 13, because then I was able to see that the chronology didn't work. There's no definitive mark of the beast right now. That all helped me get out of that panic attack. Now, I have seen MAGA hats referred to as the mark of the beast because it is a mark on a person's forehead, but I haven't yet heard of people being able to buy and sell without them. Same with the vaccine cards, which came a little closer, but no dice. Yes, the panic about the vaccine being the mark of the beast has more or less blown over now, so that's probably good. Anyway, Trump did refer to himself in a tweet as the chosen one, or he referred to himself as the chosen one, which does seem messianic. He tweeted in 2019 that Jewish people in Israel love him like he is the king of Israel. They love him like he is the second coming of God. That language about himself is definitely concerning for Antichrist reasons.
Yes. I should tell you, this is also another thing that I read about recently. There's a a conspiracy theory that I read about recently that Donald Trump is owned by Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, and that they plan to tank the United States economy by making the Treasury go into default in order to weaken the dollar and have it replaced as the default world currency by like Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency, and thereby they would weaken the United States on the world stage in order to create a power vacuum that could be filled by Russia and China.
I believe that more than I believe that Trump is the Antichrist. So one other last little detail that I turned up. Did you know that Trump's son-in-law owned the building at 666 Fifth Avenue in New York?
No, but that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, he's trying to get the address changed to 660. For obvious reasons.
Kushner owns a lot of buildings.
So let's run down the Antichrist qualifications for Trump real quick before we go to offering.
Okay.
He will appear abruptly like a monster rising out of the sea.
I wouldn't say that's accurate. He's been kind of in the public eye for decades.
Obama did appear abruptly.
Yes. Much more abruptly than Trump. His rise was pretty meteoric.
Famous for 40 years. He will have 7 heads.
I don't know what that one is.
You could make it. You could make it happen if you find like 7 people who work for him that run his various businesses, or 7 cabinet members who closely align with him. You can make that anywhere. He will have 10 horns and 10 crowns. You can make that up somewhere with cabinet or senators that follow him or something. He will rule 10 countries in addition to his own. That's also pretty easy when you're dealing with a U.S. president because you can pull, the UN, this, that, and the other, or NATO, or whatever. Yeah. Upon each head, the name of blasphemy will be written. Now, this one is true because of the hats. Yeah. He will be like a leopard. I'm not quite sure how Trump is like a leopard, unless
He's orange.
He's orange, and also a leopard can't change its spots, and he has always been a serial rapist and nasty person.
Wild of the Bible to predict an idiom in English 2,000 years earlier.
Oh, that idiom's in the Bible.
Really?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah,
Where?
I think it's on your side. Hold on.
Wow, I didn't know that. I just,
I feel like it's in Isaiah, but we're going to find out. Leopard change his spots. Bible, Jeremiah.
Wow.
Yeah, Jeremiah
okay.
13:23. So that idiom actually does come from your side of the Bible. There we go. Bible predicted Trump. His feet will be those of a bear. Don't know what that means.
Do bears wear lifts in their shoes?
I don't know. Most of the bears that I've been acquainted with don't wear shoes. Okay, his mouth will be that of a lion.
Do lions' breath stink?
Probably. Cat's breath stink.
I don't want to know what that dude smells like.
Oh no, I don't either. Thank you.
I bet his turkey neck smells like earring backs.
The dragon will give him his power, his seal, his seat, and great authority. That one's pretty easy because you could either go with, the dragon is the Republican Party, or the dragon is the United States at large, or the dragon is Satan, who gave him power, and the seat being the office of the president. That one is an easy win. He will be the 8th king of a country, is a little bit harder.
It was 45th.
45th.
Can you do 845 numerology Bible stuff or?
No, I would do that is I would go back and find that there have only been 7 legitimate presidents before him.
Oh, so if you're QAnon, you're like, okay, yeah, but JFK Jr. has been the president for 40 years or something.
Exactly. Yeah, that kind of thing. And there's always been a shadow president that's legally been president. And so there's only been 7 of them, and Trump is 8.
Oh, right. If you're Sovsit and you're but it's the corporation of the United States of America, not the actual,
Right. There's plenty of ways to find that, as well as 10 other kings will give their strength and power to him. They will have no power of their own, but serve at his discretion. They will be of one mind or ideology with the Antichrist. There are plenty of ways to make that work. The number of his name will be connected with 666. The only thing I was able to find for Trump was his son-in-law owning the building at 666 Fifth Avenue. Weirdly.
Yeah, but Trump's son-in-law doesn't have his name.
Right, yeah. Well,
it's Kushner.
Yeah, different name. And then one of the heads will have a deadly wound. The wound will be healed dramatically and the world will be astonished. Genuinely, I would count appear to have a deadly wound and then the wound healed dramatically. I would count what happened to Trump for this, because he appeared to have a deadly wound, could have been killed, and then dramatically was revealed to not be that severely injured. I would count that. But not all the qualifications. I think Trump is probably not the Antichrist. And again, when I had my little spiral about this, I was not feeling well at all. And what really helped me was going back and seeing the qualifications that Trump does not fill, and going back to reviewing the facts about the Book of Revelation, the facts that it was most likely not written as a distinct particular future prophecy. All of those things that we've learned about the book really helped me chill out when I had that panic attack.
My thought is that if Trump is the Antichrist, then he rose to power 7.5 years ago.
Yeah.
When he became president the first time, which means that the tribulation is almost over.
Yeah.
So,
unless there's a gap between the tribulation and the Great Tribulation, which I don't know why people don't talk about that more.
It's hard to do math about it.
Right. But there's a pause in heaven between the tribulation and the great tribulation. And people, like it says for the space of half an hour, but people always assume that's a literal half hour. It's odd to me. Okay.
Who knows?
Let's take up the offering, finish up this episode.
We are back from our break. And if that last section freaked anybody out about the literal rise of the Antichrist in today, day and age, here is another instance of people predicting or identifying the Antichrist and being very extremely wrong.
That should bring us all comfort.
Yes, it should, because every time somebody's tried to predict the Antichrist before, they've always been wrong.
I can tell you've been hanging out with Chad because that was his voice.
It was?
They've always been wrong.
Every single time. Every time. I'm speaking, of course, of Mikhail Gorbachev, who was the leader of the Soviet Union, the USSR, from 1985 until the country's dissolution in August of 1991. Mr. Gorbachev died about 2 years ago at the age of 91 and never succeeded in the Antichrist's goal of uniting the whole world under one world government and abolishing world currencies and establishing a new currency. So big swing and a miss. Sorry. However, I purchased on Amazon.com the book Gorbachev, Has the Real Antichrist Come? By Robert W. Fade. This book is a real printed paperback book. I have it here in paperback, and it's like got glossy cover and everything. It's a real book. It has an ISBN number on it as well, published by Victory House Publishers in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1988. According to the About the Author section of the book, Fade was a nuclear engineer, and is the author of A Scientific Approach to Christianity, a book that he apparently wrote. He served in both World War II and the Korean War, and later converted to Christianity after surviving cancer. What did we say about adverse life experiences when we were talking about Kelly Havens? Making people want to go crazy into Christianity. Yeah, so he survived cancer and then became a Christian. He then used numerology to predict Mikhail Gorbachev as the Antichrist, for which he was ordered the Ig Nobel Prize in mathematics. Not the Nobel Prize, the Ig Nobel Prize, which is like, you know how they have the Oscars and they have the Raspberry Awards, the Razzie Awards? This is like the Razzie Awards for that. And I want to read from the preface of this book. Is that okay?
Oh, yeah.
So this is the first sentence. It says, Preface. This will not be a pleasant book to read. For many, it will be terrifying. Others will dismiss what it says entirely, calling it foolishness. How did you ever guess? Some, I pray, will take warning and begin to get spiritually ready for what is to come. I did not want to write this book. It actually began about 1 a.m. on March 8th, 1985, when I was awakened with a tremendous sense that something of great importance was about to happen. I was led by the Lord into the book of Revelation. The Lord showed me what the 10 kingdoms and the 10 horns of Revelation's prophecy might mean in relation to the Soviet Union and the communist bloc nations. 3 days later, Konstantin Cherenko died suddenly.
Oh.
We'll get to that. Maybe not so suddenly. Mikhail Sergeyevich Gorbachev was elected by the Politburo as General Secretary of the Soviet Communist Party. Dun, dun, dun. Fade wastes no time in getting into it with the 666 stuff. Chapter 1 is 666. First chapter is 666, the number of his name. And I was skeptical because I've personally plugged Gorbachev's name into gematrix.com, or gematrix.org, excuse me. It's not a .com, it's a .org. They just want to get the information out there. They're a nonprofit. And I found absolutely zilch. Gematrix.org, by the way, is the gematria site that we used for trying to figure out if Taylor Swift was the Antichrist a few months ago. Robert W. Fade is a nuclear engineer and is much smarter than I am. Fade, rightly, I might add, understood that Neither English, Greek, nor Hebrew gematria would work for Mikhail Gorbachev because he was a Russian. Fun fact, Gorbachev was the first Soviet premier to be born post-Russian Revolution. All of his predecessors were born under the Russian Empire. Yeah, but he was a Russian. Russian language does not use the same alphabet as the English language or the Hebrew language or the Greek language, even though all these languages use Arabic numerals like we use in math. Russian uses a Cyrillic alphabet, and if you plug Mikhail Sergeyevich Gorbachev into Cyrillic numerology, then you get absolutely nothing.
Oh.
However, if you plug Mikhail S. Gorbachev into Cyrillic numerology, you get, and can I get a drum roll, please? 1,332. If you're a math whiz or a nuclear engineer like Fade, you have spotted by now that 1,332 is 666 times 2.
Oh.
So twice 666, yeah. How do you like them, Kreplach? Fade was able to find that if you translate Mikhail Gorbachev into Greek characters, then you will find that his first and last name each have the same numerological value as Jesus in Greek. I don't know what this does, but this is to try to say that his name is the same as Jesus, but he's not Jesus, which I guess is a sign of the Antichrist. Fade then goes on to say that the probability of anybody having their name with these specific numerological values being the same as 666 and Jesus is 1 in, and I want to make sure I get this number right, 318,300,604,672.
Okay.
I would like to point out that at this point that the odds of me being birthday twins with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson while also being bald and also being more handsome than Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is 1 in 600 billion, but here I am, guilty as charged. What are the odds?
Okay, wait. Number one, are you really birthday twins with Dwayne Johnson?
Yes, him and David Beckham.
That's extremely cool. I really want to see the math on anybody having a name with the specific numerological values being the same as 666 and Jesus being 1 in 318 billion and change.
He goes into it. I'll take a picture and send it to you. It's kind of nonsensical.
I want to see the math, but also names are so subjective. I'm pretty sure that math only works if there's some kind of standard, like if names were standardized and the first person born on a certain day was AAAAA and the second person was AAAAB, so on and so on.
Yes.
Like names are so subjective. Names come into and out of style. Last names are predicted in most societies by paternity. I don't think you can do math on something so subjective. That doesn't make any sense.
Well, he managed to. I do think it's funny that his excuse for why it doesn't work with the middle name and only the middle initial is because his response was, who the f*** knows this guy's middle name anyway? That was literally his reasoning. Fade goes on to say that Gorbachev's predecessor, Konstantin Churenko, died unexpectedly, which is what thrust Gorbachev onto the scene as the new leader of the USSR. Out of obscurity, might I add. Came out of nowhere. I did some digging into this claim and I found something interesting, which is that Konstantin Churenko became the Soviet premier in February of 1984. He died of congestive heart failure, among other things, in March of 1985 at the age of 73. However, this was not like a sudden heart attack or a sudden onset of heart disease. Churenko, like many people who grew up in Siberia in the early to mid 20th century, began chain smoking before the age of 10. And like many Russians and many people in the Soviet Politburo, he drank vodka like normal people drink water. By the time he was made premier, he had suffered from emphysema for many years. He had suffered from right side heart failure, so only half of his heart worked. And during his time as the leader of the Soviet Union, he mainly gave direction from a hospital bed via correspondence because he was not well enough to attend meetings in person.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, you guys think Joe Biden is old, then get a load of this guy. I mean, this guy is not as old as Joe Biden, but like, Jesus, like I mean, what the hell, Soviets? Why'd you pick him? So I think it's debunked to say that Cherenko's death was completely out of left field. I think it's more that the Soviet Union was such an ineffectual bureaucracy that they picked somebody who was not well enough to do the job effectively. However, I think that Fade's actual argument here is that Gorbachev was seemingly plucked from obscurity to lead the Soviet Union. And so I did some research into that. And prior to becoming the premier, Gorbachev's job in government was as secretary of the Central Committee of the Soviet Union, which is different than secretary of the Communist Party. This was a largely ceremonial position, but as it was a ceremonial position, you can't exactly say that nobody knew who he was. This is not the same job as general secretary of the Communist Party, which is like the official title of the leader. He was secretary of the Central Committee. It's confusing because in the inner workings of the Soviet government, it's like there's 1,000 committees and everybody's secretary of something. There's like 1 million bureaus, and there's like so many people that are like secretary of this, secretary of that. A Politburo secretary of the Central Committee is different than the secretary of the Central Committee of the Politburo. It's like that kind of thing.
Oh, an assistant to the manager.
Yeah, it's like that. Assistant to the regional manager or assistant regional manager. Anyway, if you were paying attention, then you knew who Gorbachev was. If you knew anything about I would liken to this if somebody like said that Kamala Harris is the Antichrist because Joe Biden decided to run again and Kamala Harris became the nominee, and you're like, who the is Kamala Harris? I've never heard of her.
Right.
That's sort of the vibe I'm getting from here. Fade's the proverbial sea that Gorbachev has risen from, according to Fade, is the great mass of people which make up the Soviet Union. It would be difficult to say that Gorbachev were from the actual sea because although he's from the south of Russia, which is kind of near both the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, I looked it up. The town that he was born in is landlocked and is about 200 miles from the Black Sea and about 450 miles from the Caspian Sea. So it would be like saying that because I'm from the coast because I grew up in Portland, even though Portland is a 90-minute drive from the ocean. So,
okay.
Yeah, he counters this by saying that Russia is, and I quote, Satan's sea. Cool. That's great. He then kind of bends over backwards to be like, I don't mean to say that the Russians are evil. And his quote from here is he's saying, the vast majority of the people of the Soviet Union are honest, hardworking, decent, and gentle folks. They do not want war any more than Americans want war. The majority are not even Communist Party members, who make up only about 9% of the Soviet population. Their situation has been forced on them, and they are powerless to do anything about it. How then did Satan take control of this land? How did the yoke of communism envelop these people? Why don't they rise up and throw off this evil and oppressive government? Why don't they demand freedom? Which, on one hand, I would like to say, yes, thank you, Robert W. Fade. It's important for us to understand that people are not their governments. But also, like it's just like, it's like, Russia is Satan's sea, but the people aren't that bad. But
well, like Judas, evil but no agency. He had to betray Jesus to fulfill messianic prophecy, and had to do it so that Jesus would die, so that the whole plan would work, so that Jesus could save everybody. But he's still a bad guy for betraying Jesus, even though he had to do it for the plan and didn't actually have a choice because he was destined to do it.
Just like Obama is like Judas, the Soviet Union people are like Judas. And Obama is like the Soviet Union people because he's also communist, even though they aren't members of the Communist Party.
Right. This is making perfect sense.
Yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense if you're in this cinematic universe. He goes on to tell about the Russian Revolution and the fight between the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks, the ideological purges, is all of that. And it's a lot of words to say communism is evil, Satan is also evil, therefore Satan is communism. His evidence that for Gorbachev being like a leopard is that communism attacks people without provocation, which to me sounds like the kind of thing that you'd say if you were a decadent capitalist pig and the enemy of the revolution.
Triggered.
Yeah. He has the feet of the bear because the bear is the symbol of Russia. I looked this up. That's actually kind of true.
Okay. That makes much more sense than everything else in this episode so far.
Of course, you could say that Kamala Harris is the Antichrist. She has the feet of the bear because she's from California, and
Right.
California is the bear. Cal is golden bears, even though she didn't go to Cal. And he has the mouth of a lion because just like when a lion roars, the leader of the Soviet Union speaks, everyone listens. Which
how do you define everyone?
it's tenuous at best. He then goes on to say that the dragon in Revelation is red, and that's important because red is the color of communism, and I guess Russia is a dragon. That doesn't make a ton of sense. I always thought that China was the dragon. Like, if you're going to say red China, like you're like communist China, also red is a significant color in Chinese culture. Like, red is the color that's used to signify luck, joy, happiness. And dragons are also important in China. Like, it doesn't make a ton of sense here. He's trying to make Russia the dragon when, if you're going to go for this metaphor, it's a lot easier to just make China the dragon. The 10 kingdoms that he claims are the 10 kingdoms that he's going to rule over are Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, East Germany, Bulgaria, and finally Afghanistan. I should remind you, this book was written in the 1980s when the Russians were trying to occupy Afghanistan and the Americans were supporting the Mujahideen who were resisting the Soviet occupation. I also think that it's odd that he includes the Baltic states of Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, which were independent countries prior to World War II and then got absorbed into the USSR. And he doesn't include like Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Moldova, Georgia, Tajikistan, like any of those countries. It's very like pick and choose. And
He
it's
had
very,
to get to 10.
yeah, he's just like, and any more than 10 is just like, I mean, it's the same way that you can say, you know, NATO is the 10 countries or whatever, because it's like, but there's more than 10 countries in NATO. So
Right. But if you dial back the clock like 50 years, you might get where some of those countries were originally part of one country. And if you look back far enough and then do some, it's like girl math, you know?
yeah.
It's fundamentalist math.
Yeah, fundy math is great, which means that one sin is equal to every other sin.
Right.
Even if one of the sins is wearing a skirt that's too short and the other sin is being a pedophile, those two things are equal because all sins are equal.
Those two things are equal, but the worst sin of all is being gay.
Yes.
And that one's not equal.
It's very pick and choose. That being said, I do find it funny that while like a lot of these countries were either like Warsaw Pact nations or previously autonomous nations that became part of the USSR through some process of absorption or annexation, they all were places where there would be an actual leader, like a unifying figure. But in Afghanistan, that's the one that he picks to be like the 10th one. Because from everything that I've ever learned about Afghanistan, it's that trying to get a single unitary government to exercise authority over the entire country of Afghanistan is literally impossible. And that if you try, bad things are going to happen to you. Fade gets around this by saying that the 10 kings are the members of the Soviet Politburo.
Okay.
There's also some weird numerology on the exact number of ICBMs and how many nuclear warheads are in ICBM. And the head wound is the war in Afghanistan that didn't go well for the Soviet Union, but they're going to come back from that. Spoiler alert, they didn't. The 7 kings that preceded Gorbachev were the Soviet leaders. So in order, it's Lenin, Stalin, Malenkov, Khrushchev, Brezhnev, Andropov, and Cherenko. Mark of the Beast is going to be a barcode. And in trying to calculate where exactly we are in the end times, he goes to wars and rumors of wars and lists every single war that has occurred since 1945 worldwide. And he calculates the death toll of every earthquake so that he can see if the numbers add up to 666. And then he writes about AIDS and moral depravity and the crack epidemic and lawlessness and advances in technology and the rebirth of Israel and the death of the nuclear family. It's just a bunch of like,
That sounds Ruckman-ish.
bad stuff is happening. What's going on? All of this crazy stuff is happening. I listened to this Billy Joel song that's coming out next year that isn't out yet, but you know, I mean, you could talk about the Russian Revolution and then the Russian Revolution in World War I, and then like the like blah blah blah, and then the Great Depression and blah 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 blah.
Also, dude, I was driving with Chuck yesterday, and we didn't start the fire. It came on my Spotify, and Chuck said, "Hey, Mom, what fire did we not start?"
All of them. That's the answer.
I'm so confused. Anyway, go ahead.
I'm glad that she's, I'm not a huge fan of that song. I think it's kind of annoying, but I understand that other people like it and it's kind of a bop.
Yeah.
Fade then refutes the claim that the temple must be rebuilt before Jesus returns, and instead he says that David's booth will be risen up and that the translation is bad. And according to him, archaeologists found whatever the hell David's booth is when they were excavating by the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, so this part of the prophecy is already fulfilled. Yeah, so I don't know what David's booth is. I looked it up and I couldn't get a straight answer. So after laying out this evidence, he goes on to say that every other prophecy in the Bible was also fulfilled, and so this one will be too. Therefore, you have to believe this theory because it just fits too well. Like, what are the odds? Which, solid. And so what will the Antichrist do? For starters, the USSR and communism will take over the entire earth. Spoiler alert, they didn't. They will take over America through the US trading with communist China. They will outlaw Christianity. They will take away America's ICBMs and other nuclear deterrents. They will blockade the Strait of Hormuz in order to prevent Gulf states from exporting oil and gas, so that they will be forced to sell their oil and gas to Russia, because Russia is going to be such a powerful industrial nation that they're not going to be a net exporter of oil, of energy anymore. They're going to need to import oil from other places, which is straight up the dumbest thing I think I've ever read. And it is clear to me that this man does not understand anything about geopolitics or anything else whatsoever. They will then put all of the people of South America under the rule of Fidel Castro. They will put nuclear weapons in space, and all media will praise Gorbachev. Basically a bunch of shit that never happened, and if you thought this stuff was going to happen, then you're dumb. So there are sections on spiritual warfare and other things. I didn't understand this at all, but I do want to read the final section of the book, which is titled Your Future.
Okay, let's go for it.
Your future. This is like literally the end of the book on page 288. It says, you have within your power the ability to decide your own future. Wow, that's incredible. I'm glad that he's not a Calvinist.
Yeah.
You can also influence the future of your loved ones and your friends. The events described in this book have already been set in motion. Nothing that you or I can do will stop them. Wow. So that actually is kind of Calvinist and determinist, but we can determine our own future. So not Calvinist. If you have not already given yourself totality to Jesus Christ, heart, mind, and soul, then lay aside everything that prevents you from doing so and do it now. This is absolutely the most important decision in your life. He is standing just outside the door of your heart. Open that door and let him in. He brings with him everlasting life.
That's a nice positive ending.
This is what's going to happen. You can't do anything about it. This book came out in 1988. 3 years later, the Soviet Union completely disbanded and broke apart into a bunch of different countries. Seriously, after reading this book, I had a conversation with my dad about what it was like growing up, and like how people looked at the Soviets, Gorbachev. My dad turned 70 this year. He was born in 1954, and so he remembers this era quite well. He's like too young to remember the Cuban Missile Crisis in detail, but he was in high school and college during Vietnam, and he was in medical school and residency during the 1980s. And so what he told me was really interesting. And he told me that like the threat of nuclear annihilation was kind of omnipresent, but despite all like the saber rattling and all the threats, it never actually happened. And some people coped with this being sort of like I'll believe it when I see it, that it's never going to happen. And that was their attitude. But some people sort of coped with this by trying to figure out a way for them to assure themselves that either like it was never happening or that when it did, they would be ready for it. And that makes sense.
Those sound like my coping mechanisms.
I mean, really. Like you try to take control of a situation by like, I need to learn everything that I can and so that I'll be okay. I think convincing yourself that the guys who are going to be doing the nuclear annihilating are servants of the devil and that Jesus is going to come back and protect you, or that Jesus is going to come back and win in the end, that's a good coping mechanism, because all you need for that to work is faith. And I think that our generation, especially, you and I, we're never going to be able to understand what that was like growing up with the Cold War, and like always having that hanging over our heads. And I think like the dividing line between millennials and Gen X, when people talk about, what's the difference between these generations? For me, I don't think it's the year that you were born in, whether you were born in like 1981 or 1982 or 83 or whatever. I think it's Did you understand the cultural significance of the Berlin Wall coming down, the fall of the Iron Curtain, the breakup of the Soviet Union, the end of the Cold War? Just like how I feel like the difference between millennials and Gen Z isn't like whether you were born in 96 or 97. It's, did you understand what 9/11 was when it happened?
Yeah, do you remember it, and what are your memories of that day? And did you experience, specifically millennials, experienced it as a child or a teenager?
Right. And did you feel like, oh, the war on terror, that's a thing? Like, did you understand what the war on terror was and that was a new thing that we had to like? I mean, my belief is that Fade's beliefs about the Antichrist were somewhat influenced by his service in World War II and Korea and his nuclear engineering career, where he would have been like constantly confronted with the realities of what the potential of that technology was. And I think that that's not necessarily a recipe for the best mental health. And then following a surviving cancer and converting to Christianity, that may have sort of been crossbred into whatever the hell this Christian fan fiction conspiracy theory is.
We should talk about, though, Chuck has joined us to say good morning, by the way.
Good morning, Chuck.
We should talk about healthy coping mechanisms, because the idea of Jesus is just going to come back and protect me or win in the end, I think you can turn that into something that's a little more healthy, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because to me, that can go to, okay, I can't control whether or not the rapture happens or apocalypse comes or the end of the world comes. I think acceptance of that is a good thing.
Yeah, and saying, oh, well, Jesus is going to protect me, and like having, even if bad things happen to me, I still have Jesus. That's something that's gotten people through a lot of things.
Right. And there's really, we talk a lot about non-harmful religion and non-harmful Christianity. I think that is one non-harmful tenet of Christianity, as long as it doesn't lead you to treat other people with recklessness.
I remember in like sixth grade, I was in sixth grade. Rosa Parks died in 2004, I think. And I was in sixth grade when that happened. And following that, I had a classmate who was black, and her mother lived through the civil rights movement. Mm-hmm. And like, I don't know if she was, I'm trying to remember. I can't remember if she was involved in any of that stuff, or if she was just like, or if she just came into our social studies class to talk to us about what it was like. And one of the things that, she talked about was, she was just like, no matter how bad it got, we always felt like we had God on our side. And that was something that she's like, and that sustained us when we had nothing else.
Wow.
So that's something that really can be a positive message and really can support, that can be like, we can keep going.
Right. And I don't believe in a literal apocalypse or tribulation coming, or Jesus coming to personally bail me out in the rapture anymore. But that surrender of, okay, I cannot control this, is actually really helpful to me. Being able to take a step back and say, all right, I can't control whether nuclear war happens. I can't control whether apocalypse comes or the Antichrist comes or any of those things. I can accept that I am afraid of them because of my programming from the IFB. I can accept that without shaming myself. I can understand why that still brings me fear without being down on myself for it. I can accept, yes, I can't control whether this happens or not. Yes, I cannot predict whether it will ever happen or not. Yes, I cannot control the fact that it does bring me some fear, but I can choose how to live my life.
Like, it kind of explains a lot of the Q stuff as well. That if you're not feeling like you're in a good place in your life, and you feel like everything is going against you, and you have this sort of thing that you're like, oh, but somebody is up there watching, like an all power, not even just like God's watching, but like the all powerful government has a secret plan to come in and save everyone. Then
humans don't deal well with feeling a loss of control. And we cling on to all kinds of things to feel that we have control in the world.
And people will also self-sabotage their situation. Whatever situation, if they're like feeling anxious about something or uncertain about something, they'll self-sabotage their own situation in order to get the worst possible outcome, because at least at that way they know what they're dealing with.
That is something that I think I used to do.
Well, I was reading about like a very extreme example of this, which is that during the AIDS crisis, during the original onset of the AIDS epidemic, people would go out and try to get it on purpose. Like that was a thing that some people would do because they didn't want to, have to deal with, do I have it or do I not have it? They would just say, no, let me get it.
That totally makes sense.
And I saw people doing that with COVID, where they were just like, let me get COVID now so I'll be immune, or let me get COVID now so that, if I die, I can die.
Yeah, and in a less extreme example, mothers of kids our age were still taking their kids to chickenpox parties.
I got chickenpox for real. Did you get chickenpox for real? You get the shot.
I got chickenpox. Chuck got the shot.
Yeah, good.
Which is it's really neat that she's been vaccinated for several childhood diseases that I did have.
Get the shot. The shot's better because then you won't get shingles as a grown-up.
I know. Like, I'm going to have the shingles shot when I get to that age. Yeah. And she's not going to because she will not get chickenpox. Yay, vaccines.
Yeah, don't vote for RFK Jr.
Brainworms for president.
Brainworms for president. Anyway, I think this episode's kind of dragged on.
I think this episode's gone off the rails in the last 5 minutes, but I've had a really nice time.
Dude, I feel like we haven't done research episodes in a while. It's just been like interviews and it's been like Pride stuff, which has been fun, but it's good to get back to it. We're going to get more to that in the fall, including next week when we have an episode coming out about dictators, which we recorded a long time ago, but then never ended up putting out. And now we're finally putting it out, but I think it's apropos to put it out at about this time. And we've also got the one coming out after that, which is all of your rapture trauma. So all of the people who wrote to us or posted in the Facebook group about the rapture trauma, we've got that one coming out week after next.
And then I found another, I really, really loved the Swedenborgianism. It's not Borg, it's Borg. Swedenborgianism episode. Yeah, somebody messaged me about it. But I really, really loved that episode. And there is, I found another group like that I want to research. Maybe that'll be September.
I would love that. I would love to do an episode about like LDS Church. I would love to get into J-Dub stuff. I would love to just like...
I'm not doing LDS until I have somebody who is an active Mormon that will talk to us. So here's my offer. It is not a gotcha interview. It is not a, I'm going to prove that you're an occult interview at all. It's going to be honest questions about behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotion control. I'm not going to gotcha you. I'm not going to try to prove that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is or is not a cult. I know that I can get voices on who are former members who would say that it's a cult. I want to balance that with voices from current members who would share their own opinion. It's a documentary style episode that I want to do. I promise I'm not going to gotcha or trip you up verbally. That's not what this is for.
I would love to do the same thing with J-Dub, and I think I know somebody who would. Oh,
I think the J-Dubs are cult. And the Mormons, I really have questions because I know that there are parishes. Just a moment, dear. Okay.
Anyway, we've got to wrap this up. You've heard Chuck wants attention, so
Chuck wants breakfast.
She wants breakfast. It's early. It's like 8 a.m. there.
It's 8 here.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. This has been a wonderful time, and I can't wait for all the stuff that we have coming forward. We are cooking with gas here. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. You can follow the pod on social media at Leaving Eden Podcast. You can follow Sadie on Twitter at Hell Yeah Sadie, on Instagram at Sadie Carpenter Music, and on TikTok. at Sadie Carpenter 1. You can follow me on Instagram.
Instagram and wherever else you are at GAVRIELHACOHEN.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. You guys have a great day. Bye-bye.
But old rolling river of time, you've healed me in too many days. No regrets, no confusion, there'll be no pollution. I'm so thankful I've decided to change my ways. I'm so thankful I decided to change.